Welcome to Culture Matters. Today we're continuing our Design Shanghai series and talking about a topic that's always popular here in Shanghai, architecture. So we'll be taking a look at the city's changing skyscrapers and skyline, and also talking about some urban planning projects happening right here in Shanghai. But before we invite our first guest, let's take a look at our design observations video to find out more. China has been experiencing an unprecedented period of growth and construction, which has sparked plenty of opportunities and confidence. But along with new growth comes new challenges. In today's episode, we'll talk to some of the very best architects in Shanghai to find out more about some of the issues behind building super tall and extremely experimental buildings. Can skyscrapers go green? What makes a design iconic? How to connect the past with the future? And how can urban planning bring out the best in a city? Let's find out in today's show. All right, let's welcome our first guest, Marshall Strabala, who is co-architect of the Shanghai Tower. Hello,
Marshall.
Marshall. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, my pleasure.
Ah, excellent. Have a seat. Marshall Strabala is an award-winning architect with 25 years of experience. Designing high-rises is one of his specialties, and he's played a key role in the design of 3 of the 10 tallest buildings in the world. He's completed award-winning projects in Europe, the Middle East, and Asia, including high-profile projects in Beijing, Seoul, Dubai, London, Hong Kong, and Saudi Arabia. So, Marshall, at 632 meters, the Shanghai Tower will be the second tallest skyscraper in the world.
Yes.
So it's very tall. But tell us, what don't we know about it? What are some of the special features?
It's a double skin.
Double skin.
It's the world's tallest double skin building. And basically, it's an idea to make skyscrapers more sustainable.
Oh, okay.
This right here is something you see in China all over the place.
Yeah, filled with tea in the
Filled with
taxis.
tea. But you see there's 2 pieces of glass. There's an outer skin and an inner skin. And what that does is it has a layer of air with insulation. So this is effectively a double skin. You had one when you were a kid, and you went to school with your coffee and your soup. It kept it warm in the winter,
right.
and then your cold drinks in the summer. So this is just a thermos bottle. So
So the same thing's going to happen with the Shanghai Tower.
the Shanghai Tower is basically a thermos bottle. It has an outer skin and an inner skin. So we lose less energy through the skin of the building. Glass is not a very good insulator.
All right, should we take a look at the
Sure,
models?
sure,
All
sure.
right. So this is the Shanghai Tower here.
This is the Shanghai Tower at 1 to 500 scale. And this is the Burj Khalifa, the world's tallest building at 1 to 500 scale.
They're pretty close in height.
Yeah. First of all, let me ask you, how many buildings are built in the world today over 400 meters?
You've got to tell me, Marshall. I don't know.
About 12.
12?
Very, very few. Most buildings are sort of way down in this range. So once you start getting above 400 meters, everything changes. It's a
Okay.
completely different world. Now, these 2 buildings look very, very different, but the principles of design and what goes into them are very much the same. The Shanghai Tower would not look like it did had we not worked on the Burj Khalifa and learned a lot about wind engineering of tall structures.
Okay.
This science has been around for a long time, and most people think that skyscrapers are governed by earthquakes. Earthquakes are the biggest force of nature on a tall building. That's not true.
No?
Wind.
It's wind. Ah.
Wind. They don't look the same, but they're both spirals.
Sure.
And that reduces the wind around the building. It reduces the force the wind puts on the building.
Okay.
So they don't look like they have anything in common, but there's a lot more in common than you think.
Then meets the eye at
Yes.
first. Now, this one is supposed to be kind of more for the people than other super talls, I hear. What does that mean exactly?
Well, I think every architecture piece we do should be for people because people inhabit them, either as homes or offices.
Sure.
So I design buildings from the inside out. How people function, how people move in the building, where they enter, try to make graceful spaces, rather than designing what it looks like from the outside. To me, it's more important how it functions on the inside. And how it looks is sort of an outcome of what we do on the inside.
Well, we want to hear more, but we also want to invite our next guest, Professor Wu Jiang, who is the Vice President of Tongji University. Hello. Thanks for joining us. We've been talking about 2 very iconic buildings already. Why is it so important for cities to have iconic buildings, and what makes an iconic building?
The city need landmark. Architects need, showing their creation.
Marshall, you would agree? I mean, we were talking about how functional and how useful they are, but it's also important for a city's image as well to have these iconic...
Absolutely. Shanghai has always been a skyline of the Bund, which is iconic, as a group of buildings. And Luzhui is also a
That's
beautiful
another one,
building.
yeah.
And
Sure.
what I thought was very astute with our client to the Shanghai Tower, they early on said, what we want is a collection of the 3 super tall buildings and work harmoniously together. Not just stand out and say we're more important than the other 2.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Or taller and taller.
Yeah.
Well, what do you mean? Talk more about the harmonious relationship
Well,
between the 3.
how do you create an icon? And I think that's what we were trying to do. Not how do you create an icon in a single building, but how can you create an iconic cityscape,
Skyline, sure.
an iconic skyline that people see and immediately recognize as Shanghai.
Sure.
And I think it's a function of 4 buildings. The Pearl Tower, Jinmao, which harmoniously represents China's past
Why does it represent China's past?
because it's a stainless steel pagoda.
Okay.
It's probably my least favorite building in all of China because I think it's a Western architect reinterpreting Chinese culture. But it's a building that's part of the skyline. You have to deal with it. WFC is about China's present,
Yes.
which is accepting foreign investment. And Shanghai Tower, Shanghai Zhongxing, is about China's future. So we have past, present, and future encapsulated in 3 skyscrapers.
I think we've got some images of iconic buildings from different cities around the world. Maybe we can take a look at them and see if you guys agree. Oh, okay. We've got
Yeah,
Eiffel
okay.
Tower,
Yes.
iconic,
Yeah.
but also maybe not so well liked when it was first built. Is
Well,
that?
it was built as a demonstration. A structural engineer, Gustav Eiffel, said, we can build tall buildings, and this is how we do it.
Yeah.
And if you look at the Burj, it has a very similar profile to this. Very wide at the bottom, very narrow at the top.
Tapered.
Actually, the height is the easiest way to show the iconic.
Yeah. All right. Got some other examples?
Obviously, the Empire State
State.
Building. It's very easy to be iconic when you have height. One thing about the Manhattan skyline is it is designed around elevators, where the building sets back or where the elevators stop. And that's how a lot of these tall, thin deco skyscrapers came about as rational responses to what was going on inside. Well, also in New York, you have a right to light issue. So the buildings have to set back every so often. So that became a style of architecture.
That's kind of very much identified with the city itself
Yes.
now
Yes.
as well. I think we've got a couple more examples.
Sydney Opera
Do
House.
you find this one beautiful? Is this important piece of architecture?
Well, iconic is one thing. The other thing, more importantly, is you have to loved, accepted by the people.
Yes.
Yeah.
And this one is a very good example. Although only 40 years history, but now Sydney is not Sydney without this.
Yes.
This
Pearl
one's
Tower, yeah.
quite familiar to us. So what about this? Was this kind of well received in the public when it first went up?
Because Shanghai was a city in 1930s, 40s, people has the tallest building in China, even in the Far East. In 1980s, the people want to show Shanghai reform again, open again. So need another iconic building. So
Yeah.
the TV Tower become the first one.
Are there other things that stand out besides the height or being the first? Any other examples of iconic buildings in Shanghai beyond the 3 super talls?
Well, there's a China Pavilion from Expo.
Oh, sure.
It's very strong and memorable. The Bund
Yeah.
is iconic.
Yeah.
And people go there. Tourists flock to the Bund.
It sometimes depends on the height. Sometimes depends on the the fall. Sometimes it depends on the location. For instance, the Shanghai Opera.
Yes.
Yeah, that's very important. Everybody look at that.
Yeah. Is Asia going through kind of an obsession with super talls these days? I mean, because so many of the big projects are being built here. Is this just because the economy is here, there's money here, there's interest in exciting buildings? What's going on?
I don't think it's an obsession. I think it's a necessity.
A necessity, really?
And this is going to sound a little odd, but cities are living, breathing things. They grow, they expand, they contract. They're organisms. And for a long time, our cities, we spread out
Yes.
to the suburbs. That's unsustainable. For every mile we go out, it costs us twice as much in energy to get back to the city center.
Yeah.
Now we're seeing multiple city centers, and we're also seeing denser parts of the city that are concentrated around public transportation. And you have to do that. It's a necessity of large cities.
Have you guys heard of the skyscraper index theory?
Yeah, I heard about that.
Explained?
Yeah. But I'm not an economist. I don't
Okay.
know.
Well, I think this theory was put out by a guy named Andrew Lawrence in 1999, and it linked, the construction of skyscrapers to the downfall of economic markets. And so he spotted this trend as the city builds skyscrapers, it's right on the verge of an economic meltdown.
I think what you're talking about is sort of the curse of the world's tallest building. Whenever you build the world's tallest building in Chicago, when the Sears Tower was built, there was a recession.
Yeah.
The next world's tallest building, I think, was KLCC, the big recession in Asia. The next super tall building was Taipei 101.
Ah, sure.
Yes.
Big recession.
Yeah.
And there is sort of this change in a city when you build a super tall building like Jinmao, WFC. Smaller tenants leave their buildings and move into the
Yes.
so they want to be in there. So there's this emptying out of the city, which hurts the city. In fact, I think one thing that is hard to fathom in the West is just the sheer numbers in China. When you look at it, the amount of buildings that we have in Shanghai for just office buildings. If we were to build that today, I did this calculation about a month ago, and I think I needed 600 Shanghai Zhongxing. That's the amount of office space that Shanghai needs based on its population.
Yeah.
Obviously, we don't have 600 super tall buildings. There's a lot of office buildings.
That's a very important figure, The base is the population.
Yeah.
Sure.
So I don't think we're going to have the same kind of financial meltdown here when the building's finished and open.
Can you just build a super tall skyscraper anywhere? What are the restraints for the land or the community?
When we talk about the high rise or the high density, it's not talking about the super high rise. It's more symbolic rather than the real meaning of the high rise. But generally speaking, as you mentioned, because of the land limitation, because of the size of the city, because of the population, we need more and more higher and higher density of the city. Yeah.
In China, you have to get planning permission. You have to make sure it fits with the infrastructure that's going on. So you can't just say, I want to do one there and do it in China.
Yeah.
There's a lot of voices. There's planning department, there's political, there's land usage. All that goes into it. It's a lot easier to build skyscrapers in America or the West because you can buy the land and do what you want with it. There's a right to do that.
But land is not prepared for that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, the taller building means you cost more difficult in technology, more materials costs, more environmental problems you're used to.
Well, what about Shanghai's facing a land subsidence issue? I read that it's been sinking. Should we be concerned? Is that because of these super talls?
No. The foundations of these super tall buildings go so deep they don't impact anything on the soil. So a set of smaller buildings that don't have deep piles might have more impact, but when land sinks, it's really eroding from below. It's not actually sinking because of the weight on it.
I think the planning, the policymakers in Shanghai has a very clear idea. For instance, one side is they always encourage the high density, more and more high-rise building. The other side is they always want to try to reduce the density if the density is too high.
Yeah.
So I think it's a balance.
You're working on a new project that's very eco-friendly as well. What's it called?
Well, it's called Tower Gen. Trying to use the basic nature of the building to collect energy is a good thing. On Shanghai Zhongxing, I was supposed to go to a factory today to look at the wind turbines we're putting at the top of the building.
Oh, okay.
Now, the original idea was to put these wind turbines at the top of the building to generate power to light the building at night, so we would not have to buy any electricity to light the building at night, which is a sustainable thing, rather than saying, we have this light show, let's use it from wind power. And if there's a lot of wind, we have a good show. If there's not much wind, no show. That was the thought. Okay, so we're adding a great deal of wind turbines on the top of the building, but these are like Band-Aids on cancer. Okay, it's a good thing to do, but it's really not solving a big issue. So here what we're doing is we're sort of building a wind farm, putting a little building around the base, and trying to manufacture it as a franchisable thing that we could put one in Shanghai, we could put one in Beijing, and it could generate energy. We're talking 100 megawatts of power, which would be about 1,000 hectares that you would need to put this on for these windmill farms. This is a power plant with a building at the base and an observation deck on top.
We'll look forward to seeing it. We're going to take a quick break, so check out our Weixing and Weibo account. And when we come back, talk about how to balance new and old, west and east in a city like Shanghai.
Shanghai is one of the jewel cities of the world, and it's been sleeping for so long. And now it's the time for Shanghai to really shine.
Culture Matters' brand new series, Design Shanghai, is giving you a front row seat to witness the city's cutting-edge creations. We'll be chatting with Shanghai's architects, designers, and other artisans about what they're making, why, and how the city's influenced their work, starting April 20th.
What is the strongest material known to man?
It's an enchanted element.
How can one protect the world's most consumed food?
A disease could devastate a crop in a matter of 10 days.
Our series focuses on technological breakthroughs linked to modern life.
If we don't do the job right, someone gets hurt. Once you go 200 out here, then you want to go a little faster.
Stay tuned to Modern Marvels, only on ICS.
阳光的缠绕，饱满的果粒，
口感多丰富，清爽又好喝，阳光满身心，甜甜有活力，美汁原果粒，把阳光给你。美汁原果粒，把阳光给你。阳光果粒在瓶中，美汁原果粒城。午后畅爽一下，就要可口可乐。
爱科学，都知道上海有200多家科普场馆等你来探索。
每天3点，300台3星手机0元秒，畅饮可口可乐，畅爽3点秒杀。
爱科学，都知道
上海有200多家科普场馆等你来探索。
关键时刻不在状态，还好有脉动。脉动富含维生素群，让你关键一刻脉动回来。闹大了，牛饮吧！一升牛饮装新上市。
Welcome back to Culture Matters. This week we're continuing our Design Shanghai series, and today we're talking about architecture. We've mostly been focusing on Shanghai's skyscrapers, but now we talk about some other exciting projects happening right here in the city. But before we invite our next guest, let's take a look at his designer diary to find out more.
Greg Yeager is a talented architect and urban planner from the U.S. He's been in Shanghai for more than 10 years and has formed a deep connection with the city. Yeager has more than 25 years of experience planning mixed-use, transit-oriented urban and suburban development projects. His expertise in urban master planning specifically suits the needs of a rapidly changing and emerging country like China. Shanghai has become his professional and cultural home.
Let's welcome our next guest, Greg Yeager, who is the Senior Vice President of RTKL and an architect and urban planner. Hello.
Hello. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Good to see you again. Good to see you again.
Have a seat. So, Greg, what originally brought you to Shanghai in the first place? You're from the U.S.?
Yes, I'm from the U.S., and I think the first thing that brought me to Shanghai was my employer saying to me, "How would you like to go to Shanghai?" And I said, "Of course."
You had no hesitations whatsoever.
No, not at all.
Why not? Why were you so excited to come?
Because this is the future. China is the center of our industry.
The place to be.
It's the place to be.
You're an architect and urban planner?
I'm an architect by training. I am an urban designer by passion.
All right. So what do the responsibilities include, or how do you balance those two roles?
One, you want to have a grand vision. You want to have great ideas, but you also have to look at the practical realities of getting it done. And particularly in a complex city like Shanghai or New York or any of the major cities, you've got to understand many things. You have to understand politics, you have to understand economics, you have to understand the commercial realities of life, and you have to be a good architect, you have to be a good designer.
Professor Wu, would you agree? Anything to add?
Yes, it's very difficult to separate the two roles.
Yeah, very much integrated.
You cannot design any architecture without the city consideration.
That's right. That's right.
What are some projects that you've been working on that you're really excited about, or projects that you've been very proud of from the past?
The most exciting projects I think I've been associated with are here the ones that are here in Shanghai.
Okay.
We're current and some of those projects are working, say, with the Shanghai government and working in other provinces of China and understanding the transformation that's going on.
Well, we've actually got an up-close design video to take a closer look at one of Greg's projects here, so let's have a look at that.
Running through the heart of Shanghai, the Suzhou River has long served as a vital source for the city's growth. The city of Shanghai recognized the riverfront property was underutilized and decided to turn this area into a more vibrant urban district. The new proposal creates 6 distinct districts and aims to develop the business area as well as to preserve the historical heritage. This mixed-use plan will create a comprehensive development and design strategy, ensuring that the new neighborhoods will offer a vibrant sense of urban living while blending seamlessly with the city around them.
What about this project?
You know, Suzhou Creek's an interesting project, and I think Professor Wu can speak to that too. It's taken a long time to think about how Suzhou Creek is going to be revitalized. And many of the first projects started with the kind of the cleaning up of the Suzhou Creek. But it's actually one of the most important real estate projects in China, because if you look at Shanghai City and you look at Expo was such a big push for the city of Shanghai. But Suzhou Creek, the area around the train station, is as big as the Expo site. And as the city grows, Shanghai can't grow much more out. It's got to grow in. And Suzhou Creek is probably the most underutilized resource that the city has.
You'd agree, Professor Wu?
Yes, but the Suzhou Creek has much more important in terms of the location. We're talking about a lot of the big buildings, iconic buildings in the expansion of the city. But Suzhou Creek is exactly in the center of the city.
Exactly
so it's more related to the urban renovation and the renewal.
Sure. Do you have to take kind of different techniques when you're looking at that area compared to a place, say, Xintiandi, which has also been kind of restored and kind of made to attract tourists? I mean, kind of how would you compare these two projects?
Suzhou Creek is, in my mind, it's real Shanghai. Xintiandi is great because it has brought an attention to good urban design and good urban development, and it's becoming an international role model for urban redevelopment. But Suzhou Creek is all about urban regeneration, because you have history, you have culture, you have decades and centuries of life that we have to look at preserving. And you can't just look at Suzhou Creek as one entity. You have to look at it as actually, when we did the master plan, it was part of its urban regeneration, part of its urban redevelopment. There are 2 different strategies. One is bit by bit infill of new structures in an existing fabric. The other one is clearing land, building a new structure, improving the lives of the people who live there, and building a better city. So the 2 have to work together.
Exactly.
Yeah, actually, when the site is exactly in the center of the city, there's no project, 2 projects exactly the same.
That's right.
Because it's different history, different location, different situation.
Sure. I think there are some kind of counterexamples to that. China's been in the news with some buildings that were kind of don't really fit into the environment or the history at all. And I think we've got some of the examples. They're actually kind of knockoff buildings, I guess you could say. All right. So most of us have seen the London Bridge, but there's also a London Bridge in Suzhou. Have you seen that one?
I have not.
You haven't?
I have not. I'm going to have to go.
We've got some more examples. All right, this is a whole town in Austria that was replicated in Guangzhou, China. I think we've got another example of Zaha Hadid's project, the Soho project in Beijing. What's going on with all these copies? I mean, is it complementary? Is it unfortunate? What's going on?
The scary thing that we live in right now is the speed of getting things done in China is intense. And people do look at ways to shortcut the process. It takes Zaha Hadid and other architects an entire career to develop their language, and it's easier for some people just to copy it.
As a designer, you can have your inspiration from some architecture, but you cannot copy that.
The thing we try and teach our staff in our office is a career is a lifetime. And you can't just look at it in bite-sized pieces. You're running a marathon race that you develop your attitudes and your culture and how you approach design over the time of your career. And so it's important to recognize that we are playing in a long-term profession. We're in our prime right now, and we want to surround ourselves with really good people to help us to teach those lessons to the next generation, and they will carry our visions forward just as we're carrying our mentors' visions forward.
Sure, and besides even the creativity principles, I mean, they just look so out of place. I mean, you can't really take an iconic building from one place and just drop it in a new environment either. But how would you describe the difference between modernization and westernization?
I have a theory that we're entering into what I call the period that I call CBD 3.0.
CBD 3.0.
And to me, New York is CBD 1.0.
What does CBD mean?
It means Central Business District.
Ah, okay.
And in China, when I first came to China, everybody wants a Lujiazhui. So you'd sit in a meeting and we want a Lujiazhui. You know, oh yes, you have a river, you're on the right side of the river, we'll build another Lujiazhui. Lujiazhui is great because it brought certain real estate fundamentals to Pudong that China did not have.
Yeah.
It's the first air rights transfer project in China. The central green in Lujiazhui, all the building FAR was applied to the taller towers. And that's a practice that's relatively new in the United States and Europe, and it was the first one done in China.
The CBD concept comes from the 1960s, more considered pure function of the attracting to the capital, attracting to the economic rules. But actually, CBD should also part of a city. City means not only for the economic function, financial function, but also for living, so for the people.
When I've had friends come to visit, they love Puxi. There's so much life going on the streets.
Yes.
And then we go to Pudong, and you're like, well, it's a little sterile. I mean, there's not really a lot of stuff going on there that you can kind of separate from other kind of generic cities, I'd say.
To me, Puxi is living Chinese. It is living life in Shanghai. Yeah. And we have to capture that in our urban development as we move forward.
So Greg, you've been living in Shanghai for 10 years?
10 years.
And
yes.
you live in the former French concession.
Yes.
But you also take some photographs of the neighborhood?
Yes, I do. It is my passion. It is my release from work.
Yeah. And you actually just recently, can I say created this book?
Oh, it's a self-published book.
Self-published masterpiece. It's beautiful. Yeah. And what do we find in this book? What's inside?
This is my favorite street in Shanghai is Nanchang Road, and you open to the right page.
Oh my goodness.
To me, as I walk to work every day or I walk home at night, you watch life. You see, in this picture, there's a woman who sits in a chair outside of her crab restaurant, and she has these two poodles. Yeah. And in that picture, those two poodles are sitting underneath her chair, and I see her every morning. I don't think she knows who I am, but it's life. It's the tree canopy. It's the shadows. It's the fact that the guys are fixing motorcycles next to a place where you eat food. To me, it's Shanghai.
Professor Wu, do you agree? Is this still interesting to you as a Chinese person?
Even I live in this city longer than Greg. Actually, we met,
when I first came here.
But both of us like this city, love this city, because we love this very active and very attractive urban life, city life with a very, very rich history.
Greg, what's going on in this photograph here?
Well,
this looks a little insane.
Well, I'll kind of step back a piece on this picture. I was flying on the flight to Beijing one night, and on the China Eastern magazine, they talked about Yongkanglu, and this is on Jiashanlu, right at the intersection. And Yongkanglu used to be the wet markets for the white Russian immigrants who landed in Shanghai in the 20s. Yeah. And the street was built by the French, a friend of the French consulate who had moved to Shanghai. Yeah. And it still today is the wet market for that part of the city. And this is right before Chinese New Year's, and I understand that the dried eels are very much a delicacy at Chinese New Year's. The ducks, the chickens, the eels. To me, I take this home to America, or I take it to Europe, and I show my friends, and people are just fascinated by these images. And part of it's technology, part of it's the experience, but these are the images that I want to record for my children. I want to keep them for my children. I want to keep them for my grandchildren.
Like, I lived here. This was my view.
It's the way we live. It's the way we live.
Gives you a very special smell.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure, yeah.
It's the way we should be living. And I think, we get into many arguments in our profession about sustainability, and are we creating green cities, and are we building a more green and robust society in the cities that we plan? And I come back and I keep saying that Shanghai, in my mind, is the model that we should use.
Why?
Well, it does all the right things. It has the right scale blocks. It has the right scale architecture. It has, Shanghai is building an incredible infrastructure system. It is a place where people enjoy life.
Yeah.
I mean, I've lived in Hong Kong and I've lived in Shanghai, and many of my Hong Kong friends will never leave Hong Kong because they think it's a great place to live. I am so happy I live in Shanghai because you see life, you see families, you see children.
Shanghai is large enough so you have a very rich, diversity of the life. You can choose. You can choose the best place you suppose for living, and also the best place for entertainments or restaurant or any. Yeah.
And I think that must be difficult to achieve, to have a huge city with millions of people, but then to still have that neighborhoody feeling, where you run into people you say hi to the people you buy fruit from. I think that's quite special. But as a resident and as an architect and urban planner, how would you say Shanghai's past has influenced its current architecture and urban planning? And how will it continue to influence it going forward?
I think some of the architecture is designed because it's the fashion, or it's easier to do because the pressures are so great. We have to get it done fast. On a lot of buildings that you see in the city, I don't think there's the attention paid to the site and the context that needs to be paid. Now, on the flip side of all that, I mean, there's some really great buildings in Shanghai where people have taken the time to explore the culture, to understand the nuance, and these are coming from both Chinese architects and international architects as well. And those are the buildings, I think, which show respect for Shanghai and its culture. I mean, Shanghai is one of the jewel cities of the world, and it's been sleeping for so long. And now it's the time for Shanghai to really shine.
Professor, will you agree?
Yes, I agree. Yeah, because as an architect or planner, you're not a person to create your own art piece or create something iconic, but more importantly to make something even very little to improve the life quality of the city. That's more important.
Well, we're going to take a quick break, so check our Wei Qing and Wei Guo count, and when we come back, talk more about how to preserve but also bringing new designs. We'll be right back.
I see this tree as a collection, as a part of the collection of the museum. And this can make the museum firmly rooted in this old town. It cannot be anywhere else in the world because of this tree.
We see culture, but how does it matter? Through history, through the arts, through folk traditions, through activities, and most importantly, through people.
I was really trying.
Find out the answers in Culture Matters. Please be sure to tune in every Sunday evening at 7:30 p.m. on ICS.
Here's where the latest
and most pressing issues are put under the spotlight.
Policies are debated.
Voices are heard. Here's where we take you to the story
and the people.
Here is where you'll get a different take on business news and the news behind the numbers.
Here's where you get a glimpse into the future.
Where the newest innovations meet tomorrow's
challenges and opportunities.
This is where the brightest minds
and biggest names
share their insights. And when it's time for a break, we can tell you where to do that too.
Shanghai Live.
Shanghai Live. Shanghai Live. Shanghai Live.
Shanghai Live
is where the world comes home to you.
我喜欢阳光下有你在身旁，我喜欢每一刻都是好时光，爱等待成长。
好时牛奶巧克力，好时一刻，好时每刻。
上海呢，现在每年有22万到23万的女孩升级为妈妈。实际上我也是一个妈妈，所以有很多的这个经历啊，或者这种感受，也是和他们是很相同的。生产的关键时刻呢，多帮一把，挽留下来的呢，就是希望和幸福。但是在我们的这个工作当中呢，并不都是在紧急关头。从第一次检查的时候，我们就要给他树立起一种信心，给个微笑啊，给一些肯定的支持。这阿公腿老要紧了，有点痛了，要忍一忍的啊。 在这里，这些新生儿呢，他们开始了人生的第一天。在这里，我们也每一刻都感受到新的希望。
喜欢城市，充满挑战，但城市污染也在挑战你原本健康的肌肤。过油、干痒等肌肤敏感化症状，全新妮维雅男士舒安小白瓶，零色素、零酒精、零矿物油，抵御肌肤敏感化。Go！ 妮维雅男士，迈出你的第一步。
Welcome back to Culture Matters. Today we're continuing our Design Shanghai series and talking about architecture. Now we want to talk more about how to balance preservation with modernization. But before we invite our next guest, let's take a look at our up-close design video. On this beautiful sunny day, we have the pleasure of coming to Zhujiajiao to meet with Zhu Xiaofeng, the architect of this museum. And today you're going to give us a little tour?
Yes. Yeah.
All right, you ready?
Yes, let's go. Yeah.
The museum houses paintings and other works of art related to the history of Zhujiajiao. Split into several galleries, most of the museum is grouped around a central atrium with a glass roof. An open zigzag stairway, made of wood, stands like an abstract sculpture in the open space.
So tell us more about this shape here. Why did you decide to build it like this? And also about the materials surrounding the walls.
Here is the only place that allow people to sit down and relax. I wanted people to have an experience of a small house with a totally open facade that is capturing the tree into their whole experience. So I decided to use double pitched roof. I almost want this to be a little bit feeling of a church.
Sure.
That we worship the tree, which is the nature.
Zhujiajiao is an ancient water town located in the suburban area of Shanghai. The different parts of the museum have been designed to engage in a meaningful dialogue with the neighboring buildings.
So we're standing here on the second floor of the museum with this stunning view of the tree. Can you tell me about the relationship between the tree and the museum? How do they kind of balance each other?
Yeah. The tree is almost like how the building is relied on. The tree has a history of 475 years old.
Wow.
And supposed to be the second oldest tree in Shanghai. Wow. A ginkgo. I see this tree as a collection, as a part of the collection of the museum. And this can make the museum firmly rooted in this old town. It cannot be anywhere else in the world because of this tree.
And you also made some design decisions of how to incorporate the museum into the rest of the neighborhood. So can you show us more of that over there?
Yes, of course. Yeah. Let's walk over. Yeah, the other courtyard.
You lead the way.
Okay.
So it looks as if the museum really fits into its surroundings, but yet it's very modern and the other buildings are very old. So how did you balance that?
I used the tour of space, what I call a semi-open courtyard. You can see the new building here, forming the courtyard, but then open the other two directions to the old town.
The old town. And the choice of color, though, I mean, they really kind of mimic each other. But did you make some changes to this building so that it wasn't exactly the same as the old?
Well, the roof is the one.
Yeah.
The roof has to be sustainable and durable for climate. So I choose the modern material, which is the zinc. It's a dark gray material, a little lighter than these black tiles. But
still in the same color
still
family.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's welcome our next guest, Zhu Xiaofeng, who is the design principal at Scenic Architecture and also visiting professor at Tongji University.
Thanks for joining us.
So, Mr. Zhu, how do you feel about this museum that we just took a look at? I mean, what's your reaction to it? Why is it an important piece of architecture?
It's a modern architecture, and then it's actually located in a traditional canal town. Like Venice. I think it's challenging, but it's also very meaningful to see if we can use our contemporary methodology or contemporary design language to insert a new architecture in an old context.
That sounds like a big challenge, though. I mean, it seems that there's so many different ways to kind of mess up. I mean, did you have a recipe for how to combine the old and the new, the modern and traditional? How did you approach that?
I think the key matter is probably scale, like what Professor Wu just said. Scale of the space. And then I don't challenge if the scale is right, so I can talk. My architecture can start to talk with the old town in terms of scale. But instead of a very specific form. On the other hand, the color and then also the material, I try to use something that the local people that are familiar with. Then start to establish a relevance between the old and the new. So I think to me, that's maybe the way I see it.
Greg, have you been to this museum?
I haven't been to the museum. We also worked on a residential project in Zhujiajiao, so I'm very familiar with the typologies and the language and the architecture that he's bringing up. It's a very unique place.
For both of your projects, do you feel as if you also had to balance kind of traditional Asian design and traditional Western design? Was that an issue at all when you were coming up with the look of the project?
To me, it's more of actually a more complicated question. The modern architecture system is for sure it's mostly come from the West. In China, we have a long history of wooden structure, but in the beginning of last century, together with the industrialization, global sprawl of the modernism, start to go into different regions. Modernism start to overwhelm me because it's true that the traditional way of building, construction in the other region is not as efficient. And also, as the modernism, the concrete and the glass, the steel, and also they cannot reflect the new transfer of economy and even political. So that's kind of a pain for the local culture everywhere in the world. But then there's a period of adapting the modern system into the local culture. There could be era. Well, no matter it's maybe are they ended or are still going on, like what you were just talking about, those copying things.
The knockoffs.
That's a must happen. If you look at one example, you feel it's weird, but I think it's something, it's reasonable in history. And then when people start to think back about what happened, and then they start to slow down and think, hey, where's our own culture? No matter it's from west or east, I think it's a balance. I put them on the same platform, and I pick them in a very fair kind of mood. But then I try to think what I need to use in this specific climate or site, then become my architecture. So this is basically my understanding and theory.
Well, how would each of you define good design for Shanghai specifically?
I think, Shanghai is always a city where kind of east meets west. And it really is, I think, you have such a rich architectural community today. And it's not just from China or America, it's from all over the world. And so, in many ways, what I'm excited about is the opportunity to bring all of these various ways of thinking and bring it together to create a common design language. And what I find is that whether I'm talking to a Spanish architect or an American architect or a Chinese architect, courtyards are important, roof structure is important. These are all things that man has in its habitation has dealt with.
Throughout
time. And so, but the question is how do we bring all these best brains together, but yet how do we preserve the city and the scale and the texture that is unique to Shanghai?
Sure, and can that fusion of East and West or old and new ever go wrong? Because I think there's some examples in history when you're talking about building a museum in Zhujiajiao. I thought of, the glass pyramids near the Louvre. I mean, here's an example of, very classical structure and a very modern structure just kind of blended right there. And I feel as if a lot of people were kind of offended by that combination, or even just projects that seemed really revolutionary at the time. The Eiffel Tower, nobody really liked that at first. So there are projects like that in China where people are kind of like, this looks terrible. We'll never get used to this. Well, we have some examples.
Okay. All right.
So let's take a look. This is. Do you guys know which this building
Yes.
What's this one?
It's in Shenyang, is it not?
Yes, it is. Fengyuan building.
Yep.
It was voted one of the ugliest buildings in the world by
Yes.
CNN. I just think this is interesting because it's supposed to be a fusion of East and West because it's supposed to mimic an old ancient Chinese coin with the hole in the middle there, but it's also kind of in this very contemporary environment. And then the next one I think you guys will recognize.
CCTV.
I think it's bold. I think it's striking. I think it defies. It tests new invention and technology, and it probably sets certain ideals and principles. But I think as an urban piece, as something that fits into the city, I think it could do a better job.
The two examples you give is perfect. I think the first one, the coin one, I think it's really a worse piece. I don't think it's going to be like Eiffel Tower. Okay. People is going to love it
Acquired taste
after 100 years. No, usually I hate those mimicking a small piece and like a cultural or sculpture and blow it up in maybe 10,000 scale.
Sure.
So that's too kind of superficial in a way.
Yeah.
And this one, Rem, before this building, I went to his lecture, he was taking some tests on high-rise building. And he was trying that because all the high-rise buildings are standing like this without touching each other. So he hoped maybe the future have this opportunity that the tower can lean together and start to talk, to communicate, not only visually but also as activities. So I think this is a nice try. Although it takes hundreds of, lots of, maybe double the price, I don't know, maybe the cost. I believe in the history of architecture, if you look it back 100 years later, maybe it's a meaningful piece. So I think this is a better example.
Do you feel as if there are more weird buildings cropping up in China than other countries right now? I mean, is it becoming kind of this lab for architectural experimentation? Is it easier for architects to be more creative here also? I mean, just because maybe there's just more openness to new designs?
Both are true. The reason is because there are more opportunities. But the problem is the same word, opportunity. There are too many opportunities for architects who are working now in Shanghai or in China. They always waste opportunities. I mean, because maybe the clients ask them to do it fast. They don't have the kind of a calm heart to really think about the design philosophy and push the design move forwards in architecture history.
There's a Washington Post article from 2010 that said a few high-profile Chinese architects and critics say some foreign designers are ignoring Chinese culture and traditions and turning China into a showcase of weirdly shaped structures, better left on the drafting table. They're using China as their new weapons testing zone, said Peng Penyan, a well-known architect and professor at Tsinghua University in Beijing. These kind of stupid things they built could never be built in their own countries, in this life, the last life, or the next. Is that too harsh, or is there some truth in it? For an architect?
Personally, I think there is some truth in that. And I go back to your comment you made just a second ago about architects needing to have a calm heart. And I want to add one more word to opportunity, and that's responsibility. We leave relics of civilization, whether it's the pyramids or the Eiffel Tower or the Empire State Building. These are buildings that people admire and respect. And what is our legacy going to be? And I don't think it's just architects either. We have to produce things fast because our country is growing so rapidly. We have to accommodate how people will live. We have to provide them shelter. We have to give them hospitals and schools and all these other things. We got to get everything done fast in 5 years.
I agree.
And that's our struggle.
Yeah. With all these skyscrapers going up and incredible and strange projects, I mean, how does that affect kind of the attitude toward urban planning then? And I mean, you talked a little bit about it before, but how to balance nature, people, buildings. Is there kind of a way to harmonize all of that?
When we talk about sustainability, I think there's a huge gap. There's a huge mistake we're having in many cities, particularly in second and third cities. Because in China, for example, the central government want to improve the cultural industry, for example. And then all the cities, no matter it's Shanghai or it's maybe a city that you never heard, they all want to build maybe a museum, historical museum, and a fine arts museum, and maybe an opera house, a musical house, or separately, and the Xintiandi,
and an exhibition,
and the CBD,
and an exhibition hall.
Yeah, an exhibition hall. So that's to me, and then make every building probably in a kind of a 5-star green building, like the Leeds or whatever. So that's to me is totally unsustainable at all. maybe for a city like Shanghai also, of course, we need opera house, probably need 2 or 3. But in other cities, we can build just one building. And I'm sure they don't have enough software to infill. So why don't we build less, but then incorporate the activities inside and then allow people to use them in different time to make the building more efficient. And even this building don't have to be a kind of a 5-star green, a lot of technology building. That could be a sustainable way of urban planning. The second issue, which is the architecture scale that we do need, in my mind, is that the loosened space, no matter it's a public building or it's a private house, we all need that kind of small, soft space to allow us to breathe.
Yeah.
And to see a green.
What's the responsibility of urban planners to kind of revitalize these old parts of the city, or maybe not so much forgotten, but where new life can kind of spring if it's done well, without turning into kind of like a set design? You know, I think sometimes Xintiandi, for example, feels like, oh, it's just a tourist mecca. It feels fake. So going back to the Suzhou Creek area, I mean, how do you also make something that's quite livable, but also want to bring kind of tourists there?
Xintiandi is a very interesting project because what it did was it unlocked the economic potential of the center of the city. Shanghai, like any other city, has to evolve. There's a very interesting article in the New York Times yesterday that talked about NIMBYism versus what they call YIMBYism. And I was kind of shocked about, well, what is YIMBYism? NIMBYism is not in my backyard.
No.
And really, these are the people who are against change. They don't want their neighborhood to change. They don't want their city to change. And YIMBYism is about a gentleman who has a website that it says, yes, in my neighborhood, or yes, in my backyard. And our cities are going to have to change. We can't continue to sprawl. We can't continue to allow our cities to merge together. We have to start bringing our city cores together. We have to start living more compact. We have to start living in a more dense environment. But the thing that we have to preserve is we have to preserve the scale and the texture of urban living. And we have to make it a good life experience, because the future generations of people who live in Shanghai are going to live in a much more dense and a much more challenging environment. And we have to make sure that our legacy to them is a great city.
So I think business model is very important to your question. Like Xintiandi is one model that cannot be easily copied in anywhere in every city. And like Shanghai also have other examples like Tianzifang and also like Suzhou Creek art galleries. Yeah. Xintiandi is also still an example that's starting from top down, but Tianzifang is from bottom up. I always hope there's more examples, more models like Tianzifang to get successful and can be used and learned by other cities in China or other parts of Shanghai to get improved.
Well, thank you to both of you for sharing kind of more of what's going on in the architectural scene here in Shanghai and China and elsewhere. Thank you for watching. Check our Weixin and Weibo account and take a moment to walk around and absorb all the architectural jewels of Shanghai that we've been talking about. And we'll see you next week as our Design Shanghai series continues.